PTF and JK back with you for another In the Money Media Top 10 Kentucky Derby Contender video. This video brought to you by our friends at DK Horse. JK, let's go through this list, and we're going to start right there at number 10 with one of the horses in this list who has some bottom, has some experience. We were waiting to see if he might break through. He did in his last start. Tistastic coming in at number 10. I've been, I think, a little more of a fan of this horse than you have. Where do you stand with him, though, after that big effort?
Yeah, I mean, I liked him in the Rebel, but I was a little disappointed with his effort in that race. Then he comes back in the Louisiana Derby and runs extremely well. The one thing I will say about Tistastic that he has in his corner is he's passed that distance test, right? Going a mile and 3/16, the Kentucky Derby at a mile and a quarter. He's answered that question about the distance while the rest of them still have to do so.
Let's talk about Cole Battle next. I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at him and his form. Another one who has some experience at this point. The last race, maybe not everything his backers were hoping for, but I do think you could put a positive spin on it. What do you think of Cole Battle right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think the pace was extremely fast in the Arkansas Derby, which it was, like your point, it was, he was closer than some of the other horses. So I could forgive him a little bit. I was always a little bit leery of how good he actually was, but he's been pretty consistent. He's not a horse that I'm going to be cutting in line to bet in the Kentucky Derby, but I do think he's a horse that has a right to be there and could be one that could be a very interesting horse at 25-1.
Very interesting story that's worth paying attention to as well with Cole Battle. Definitely one we're going to be hearing more about in the weeks to come. One horse whose fate for the Derby may be decided this weekend when he makes his return to the races. One I've always liked. When he crossed the line after a tricky trip on debut, I said, half kidding, we have seen the Derby winner. Chancer McPatrick back in action this weekend. Are you with him?
Look, he's a very impressive horse with 2 Grade 1 wins as a 2-year-old. But, man, he's been disappointing in his last 2 starts. He's going to absolutely have to prove it to me on Saturday. And if he does so, he better do it impressively, because that would still maybe not be enough for me to get on board.
Number 7 on the list is Barnes. Barnes is a funny one, because if there wasn't a horse in existence a little bit higher on this list, everybody would be talking about him as the next phenom. This horse who ran a very fast 104 speed figure last time. You know, he did it with an easier trip than the winner. We'll get to the specifics of that a little bit later on. But if you just look at Barnes on his own merits and you pay attention to the hands that he's in, isn't he a serious contender for this race?
If you love the top horse we'll talk about in here, journalism, I'll just go ahead and bury the lead. If you like him, you got to like Barnes. He ran well, I thought, last time. He does have to take another step forward, but I think he might be a little ignored at this point based on that effort.
The hate might have gotten too far, as it were. We'll see what happens with Barnes moving forward. Next on the list, a horse that you are on record of being very critical of. He sort of kicked sand in your face a little bit maybe the other day. He did take advantage of a fast pace in the Arkansas Derby, but Sandman looked pretty good running him down in the lane there, and he's going to have a lot of support heading to Kentucky. Are you going to double down or recant?
Oh, it's actually gotten better. I think the play against him angle that I've been a part of is actually a better angle now. He's going to be overbet in every start that he's in because he's had 3 nice runs, visually impressive runs, but all 3 of those runs have come with huge setups. He's a complete play against for me. I'd love to own him. In fact, he might be one of the horses I would like to own most, but he's not one I want to bet on.
If you're playing the Kentucky Derby Superfecta, I would not leave him out of the lower spots. Are you so against him that you wouldn't even give me that?
No, he makes sense there. I just don't want him on top.
We head to the top 5, and we do so with a horse who was very impressive when last seen on the racetrack. Tappan Street, JK, I assume this one would be near the top of your list at this stage?
Yeah, look, he's a horse for Brad Cox, who obviously knows his way around these 3-year-old races, these dirt races. I thought he ran well last time. He ran into Sovereignty, who we'll talk about in a little bit. He's still got to run just a taste faster for me to get excited about him, but he's definitely in the mix, deserves to be in the top 5.
We're going to move to a horse that's going to be a stranger for a lot of people. But boy, if you watch the tape of his last run in the Fukuryu Stakes over in Japan, it's easy to see what some of this fuss about Luxor Cafe is about. I'll put in a quick plug for the home team. I'm not withholding this information. I don't have it yet, but I will tell you this. We will have figure equivalents for Japanese runners as part of our In the Money Plus service that will be published much closer to the Derby. If you want to learn more about that, there's tons of other things that come with it. InTheMoneyPodcast.com/plus. But I have to say, JK, I've watched it a couple of times now, and this Luxor Cafe, he certainly passes the eye test. Is he a Kentucky Derby contender to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, Japan has really kind of turned the corner in their participation in these races in the States. And Forever Young, obviously, last year, almost winning the Kentucky Derby by a couple of inches. It seems like they're going to eventually bring one over here that's going to win. He looks nice on paper. He's American bred, so he should handle all the circumstances of the Kentucky Derby. But I'm interested to see that figure when it comes back, to see how fast he actually ran. You know, Beyer speed figures. It's like a quarterback rating in football. The higher, the better. I want to see where his equivalence is.
Our great friend, Eric DeCoster, the content producer of these segments, has been doing such a great job keeping these lists up to date. Love that poll for Luxor Cafe, putting him up there aggressively. That brings us to the top 3 that have been the top 3 on Eric's list. And we go to one that some people are going to throw up their hands and say, you're still underrating the 2-year-old champion. What has Citizen Bull done wrong to be 3rd on this list and not somewhere closer to the top?
It's pretty simple. He hasn't done anything wrong, but he hasn't necessarily done enough right to get me excited, right? He just shows up, doesn't make any mistakes, wins races, but it usually takes a little bit more than that to win the Kentucky Derby. And maybe this weekend he'll prove that, but he's going to have to prove it to kind of move himself a little bit higher on that list.
We will have preview videos of all the big races coming up this weekend. Best way to make sure you don't miss them is to subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Click that notification bell, and hey, like the videos while you're at it. It helps us out, and you know, it's all about the algorithm these days. Let's get to number 2 on the list. This is Sovereignty. This is a horse, when I made my personal Derby list back in November, was at the very top of it. He returned to action recently, and I think he probably did what he had to do. I mean, if you have the original bingo card from the In the Money Players podcast, Bill Mott with a target is one of those things on it. He is a trainer who points to a spot. The last day was not the spot. The Kentucky Derby is. Why am I not more excited about him as a guy who's been on this train the whole time when I just made that argument? Something is holding me back from saying this is my top pick here.
Well, I think that I think you're looking for incremental improvement, right? He showed up and ran well in the Fountain of Youth, but I think you were hoping in the Florida Derby he was going to take that other big jump, and he didn't. He basically ran the same or maybe a little bit worse. Now, maybe that might be by design, and maybe Bill Mott's going to have him ready to run his best race on the first Saturday in May, but I would say that looking for a step forward, it probably was a little disappointing.
Yeah, he didn't travel great is all I'd say. But maybe of all the horses, and we're going to be covering the works at Churchill Downs as we get closer to the Derby. More info you can find wherever we are producing our content. He's one of the ones I'm the most interested to see how he's looking on the eve of the race, heading into the race in those few days, because maybe he is going to be cycling back up to that new top that he's going to need to dethrone the horse that we have at number 1. Jonathan, I already started in faraway places that let you bet on horse racing, anti-post. Always like to see what kind of numbers are hanging on these horses I'm interested in. I was interested to see that Journalism 6-1 internationally. I don't know that he's going to be that on the day. A lot's going to depend on when we see him next, obviously. But I have to say, that's an appealing price to me. I think this horse might be special.
No, I agree with you. And we talked a little bit earlier about those Beyer speed figures. He has the fastest Beyer speed figure of all of these horses. And he's trained by a guy in Michael McCarthy who can have his horses continue to improve. I'm very excited to see how this horse runs on Saturday. If he takes another step forward, he might be one of those horses you start talking about Triple Crown.
Thanks so much to everybody for watching this video. Our new partners over at DK Horse. Mentioned it before. I'll mention it one more time. So many other videos to choose from. Just click on one that's on the screen right now and see what I'm talking about. Really appreciate doing this with you, JK,